Windhorse is our innate ability to uplift ourselves and our environment by giving rise to a positive energy that is both relaxed and disciplined. Since 1981, Windhorse Community Services has integrated this understanding with modern conventional therapies, meditation, and contemplative traditions in the development of at-home, whole-person mental health recovery. Windhorse Journal is dedicated to the mission of communicating decades of clinical and personal experience to professionals, educators, students, and anyone seeking recovery options. Please join the dialogue.
Welcome to Windhorse Journal Entry 80. This is the first of a 14-part series that will dive into basic attendance on a Windhorse team. Throughout this series, we will have conversations with staff members representing each of the roles at Windhorse Community Services. This first recording provides a general overview of basic attendance and relational medicine. The group discusses important overarching themes of therapeutic relationships, as well as an anecdotal experience from a Windhorse clinician. Thank you for listening.
Welcome everyone to this podcast of the Windhorse Journal, and I'm your host, Chuck Knapp. Today's conversation is the first of a series focusing on the clinical practice of basic attendance, which is the primary therapeutic activity within the Windhorse approach. I'm so pleased to be joined here by this distinguished group of Windhorse clinicians, and I will now introduce you all. Laura Ann Sampson has worked as a team counselor at Windhorse Community Services and as a basic attendant at Windhorse Elder Care since June of 2021. They hold an MFA in dance from the University of Colorado Boulder and are currently an artist in residence at Redline Contemporary Art Center in Denver. They are also a certified practitioner of the Feldenkrais method, a form of somatic education that helps individuals find a greater sense of skeletal connection, ease, and freedom in movement. All right. Connor Hollingsworth moved from Chicago to Boulder in 2014 in order to pursue a master's in music at the University of Colorado. At that time, he began a nearly 2-year tenure as a housemate with Windhorse Community Services and has since moved on to team counselor and assistant team leader roles. The philosophy and contemplative approach of WCS has proved to be a thoroughly harmonious counterpoint to his parallel career as a freelance musician. When Connor is not performing with symphony orchestras and jazz ensembles throughout the Front Range, he enjoys exploring the spectacular hiking opportunities that the nearby landscapes offer. Jeremy Ellis is a team leader and assistant team leader at Windhorse. He began his journey at Windhorse Community Services as a housemate in 2015. He enjoys a variety of contemplative and creative practices and is currently obsessed with his new Instant Pot. Jeremy, what is an Instant Pot?
Oh, it's a newfangled version of a pressure cooker.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Kathy Emery is a graduate of the Naropa University's East-West Psychology program in 1980, which then it was Naropa Institute. We remember that one. And has been actively working with the Windhorse approach to treatment and care since its inception in 1981, when it was first called Maitri Psychological Services. She's currently employed with Windhorse Elder Care and Windhorse Community Services as a team supervisor and psychotherapist. She's also a senior teacher of the approach and feels a lifelong commitment to bringing the contemplative view and practice of care and therapy into her work with individuals and groups, as well as through her teaching and writing. Kathy, you are one of the co-founders of the whole catastrophe, and we've been fortunate to work together for a long time. It's nice that you could be part of this, because you were actually part of the group that developed basic attendance. So, Jack Gipple. Jack is our clinical services manager here at Windhorse Community Services, and you earned your master's in transpersonal psychology in 1991 and have worked extensively with families, couples, individuals with issues related to behavioral and substance addictions, as well as a wide range of mental health challenges. You've taught at the Naropa Contemplative Psychology Department for a long time. You were affiliated with the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless since 1992. You've had your hand in writing some very nice pieces on the Windhorse approach. And you also have taught Tai Chi since 1985, and you are a top bar beekeeper, pinhole photographer, yogi, gardener, home orchardist, father, and husband. So thank you again all for being here. And I'm going to start us off with a quick, about 3-minute overview on what we'll be doing today. That's going to be followed up by a story that Laura Ann, you're going to be presenting about being on a basic attendance shift with a client. The Windhorse approach is health-based, meaning that we understand all people to be fundamentally sane and inclined to return to health and balance when the right conditions are present. In this view, confusion or extreme mental states, or some use the term mental illness, are temporary obstacles, more like clouds that may obscure the brilliance of the sun. But just as the sun is never diminished by clouds, likewise our sanity is not diminished by our confusion, so it's always there as our deepest ally. We know this can really sound like wishful thinking, but it's actually our experience both personally as well as in our extensive work with clients and families. At its most basic level, the Windhorse approach is characterized by creating individually tailored, whole person recovery environments which invite that person's sanity and health and balance. Whole person here means that we consider and include all aspects of a person's life in the therapeutic process. Our environments are grounded in their physical and domestic world. We cultivate open and healthy relationships. And of course, we work to help our clients to clarify and understand their minds and emotions. The primary way that we develop this environment is through relationship. We'll often refer to Windhorse as relational medicine, as we know that when a person is experiencing mental confusion or distress, it's almost always helpful to be in the midst of people with healthy lifestyles and relatively healthy minds. We actually experience health to be surprisingly contagious, so we create teams specific to each client's personality and interests in order to jumpstart their connection with ordinary, wholesome life activity. Things such as keeping their home in good order, developing healthy habits of eating, sleeping and exercise, engaging in their interests, meeting people outside of the team, which will often involve the greater Windhorse community, school, and work. A big part of the effectiveness of our approach is that we're not trying to make our clients into someone they're not. We're actually supporting them to be the most integrated and harmonious version of who they most basically are and who they most know themselves to be at their core. Another part of the power of our environments is that we have a number of complementary roles involved in a team, starting with the housemate, who's a staff person living in the therapeutic household, the team counselors, who spend the most time with the client in the midst of ordinary life activity, the team leaders, who organize the activity of the team and also spend time with the client in the household, the psychotherapist, who meets with the client usually twice per week, the team supervisor, who tends to the overall activity of the team and also works with the family. And if medications are used, the psychiatrist is also an integrated part of the team. So the client is also fully included as a team member, likewise families when possible, and together we all create a system of relationships that's resilient and which can flexibly adapt as the recovery path evolves. This team and the environment that everyone creates is clearly a more powerful and intelligent therapeutic system than the sum of its parts. So this was a very broad stroke description. And to begin bringing this to life, Laura Ann, from the perspective of a team counselor, will lead us through a description of being with a client while doing basic attendance. From there, our group will discuss their story, noting some of the principles involved in basic attendance, which will be expanded on over the course of this podcast series. Laura Ann, are you ready to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on this, Chuck. I guess I kind of want to start by saying that this is one of the first clients I had as a teen counselor. And one of the things I found really interesting, and I was thinking about as you were talking, was how much we really do tailor each team to the individual so that every team kind of feels like it's a different job almost, being with each person. So this client is someone who had been with Windhorse for a couple months before I had joined, and it's someone who was dealing with pretty extreme anxiety, and her experience of that anxiety was often having a hard time deciphering what she wanted versus what she felt like others wanted of her, and kind of freezing. So she had a really hard time seeing through things that she had begun, seeing through things that others wanted her to do. And so when we kind of came in and started working with her, there was a little bit of this tension kind of inherently in the dynamic around this question of whether or not she wanted us in her space, or if it was something her parents wanted for her, or if, whether when we were working with maybe helping clean her house or things like that, if it was our priorities or her priorities. So there was a lot of questions around that. And so for a long time, the shifts I spent with her were questions where at first we would kind of just be really quiet. And there was a lot of sort of I'm calling it parallel play, where she would read a book and I would read a book, or she would start, watercoloring, or, she had her own drawing practice, and I would sort of do the same thing. And we'd kind of compare notes and things like that. And as time went on, we started to have more conversations about this question of wanting to do something versus feeling like one should do something. And it became this sort of shorthand that we would talk about. And as our shifts went on, we would take walks, and she brought up one time feeling like she was curious about my relationship to gender as a trans, I'm a trans non-binary person. And, she would ask me questions like around when I cut my hair, or what prompted that, and different things around that, or how I started changing how I wanted to dress and how I knew. And so we started to have more conversations around that. And she would bring up wanting to go shopping for more men's clothing. And that came up over a couple shifts. And then I would bring it up and say, well, maybe we could go on a shopping trip or something like that. And she would sort of go, oh, I don't know. It was kind of this thing where it was unclear whether it was my idea or her idea, even though she had initiated it, or a previous version of herself who was interested in this thing. And so it was this kind of interesting ongoing thing. And then one day we were talking, and we were having a conversation around gender identity. And we were talking about internalized transphobia or homophobia, and kind of the feeling of having to decipher for oneself if how I think I want to look is my own idea, or something that's come from some other source, some other culture, a parent, a community I've been in, or how do I kind of prioritize that? How do I make sense of that? And I had expressed to her that was something that was confusing for me, and it was confusing for me for a long time and continues to be. And it was this moment where it clicked for us that she saw me having an experience of feeling like I didn't always know what I wanted, if it was my own want or someone else's. And so all of a sudden we sort of had this place where she could see someone else having that experience. And so at some point we ended up going on one of these shopping trips, and it was, it was a trip where I was also looking for clothing. And so, I was kind of moving between the men and women's section, and, showing her things I wanted to try on and things I was looking at. And, and she would kind of tentatively look at certain things and then move away or things like that. But we just were able to start to develop this relationship through kind of exploring something together and trying to, and connecting around it. And so anyway, that's kind of the story I was thinking of that I wanted to share today.
How long an arc of time did you just describe from the beginning, when she was not sure whether you and the team were just an extension of her family's wishes or something, something else, and to that very end frame that she had there?
Months. That was months of time.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was very much kind of this ongoing question, and it would show up in all these different ways around what it meant, and and these questions of what it means to take care of oneself too. It would show up in these other places around the environment and the house and things like that, and we really had to feel out together what it meant for her to have assistance or help, because that for many people can feel enabling in some kind of way, or it can feel like I don't deserve this kind of help, or B, this is getting in my way, or embarrassed that I can't do it myself. And so we started to just get really subtle about it in terms of who was doing what and how we would help each other.
That's a great story, and a great description. And I'm wondering, there's probably some psychotherapy that was going on in parallel with your work with her. So differentiating how those roles might attend to this person.
Well, I had a question about how it was different, because you went into a lot of depth with this person about their inner process. You're talking about internalized transphobia. And I guess it would be good to hear more from you, Lori Ann, or others about those moments when you can go really deep, even if no matter where you are, and then what's the differentiation between your role and the intensive psychotherapy therapist, where they would be meeting in a contained setting, all the differences between the two roles. I'm just curious what came up for you as this came up, between you.
Yeah, I would say what I recognize is in the difference in the relationship is in the role I'm in as a team counselor, I'm serving as kind of like a peer for the person. And so there's something about the experience that's less about really investigating the territory of how they might relate to a certain theme or something like that. And it feels much more about a point of connection. And there's a place where, one of the things that I actually really love about this job is that there's space for me to share experiences I've had in a way that would be different than someone in psychotherapy. And so there's places in which the person is sometimes asking me questions and I'm asking them questions, but also talking about it as kind of a cultural experience, And for me, it's also interesting to think about, we sort of bring all of ourselves to the job. So, my experience or work in graduate school with queer theory and things like that, I've spent a lot of time thinking about internalized transphobia and homophobia and what that feels like. And so there's this part of it that's not only talking about it as an emotional experience or, a personal experience, but also as, a cultural phenomenon taking place that is being negotiated by people in marginalized positions. And so I think that what I like about this particular role is there's room to relate around these things that feels a little bit lighter and not so much about trying to get something done, if that makes sense, but actually just being invested in the connection.
Listening to you describe it, I'm guessing you didn't, that was probably the fruitional conversation to use the theory and things, because it sounds like you just started by showing up and finding, just being real with yourself and letting this other person be their real self, and then things unfolded from there, and you kind of found places you meet and overlap, and there's kind of a natural process of, it has parallels to developing any relationship and friendship and connection, and then it can lead eventually to those kind of bigger insights. But like you said, this happened over months. I'm guessing it started slower and then built as the basic trust that you weren't going to lay some agenda on the person. You were just being real, and then they could relax and be real, and then you got into this very genuine, real place between you.
Totally. I think what I also appreciate about it is it's not about kind of getting anyone anywhere, at least in the role I'm in. It's about forming a connection and seeing what that connection can hold.
And I think that's also true in at least Windhorse, the psychotherapy that goes on. I mean, something that's important to say is we view basic attendance as kind of cutting across all roles. And in a way, we're describing here as kind of foundational basic attendance. In some ways, I was thinking it's the same in a psychotherapy session. We're not trying to get anywhere per se or impose any big insights on people. We're doing the same thing you are in psychotherapy. The one big difference I would say is in the office, you've got the office. And pretty soon that's all you got is the office, and you're talking. So you're really in this conversational place. When you're out on a shift with someone, as we call it, where you're out in the world, you've got the world and you're interacting with, you've got all these things going on out there that can support connecting and developing relationship. It's a little different from in the office. That to me is a big difference between the two. So.
There's so many different ways that we meet with people and what they need and how we can respond and be with them as opposed to doing to them. I think that's a kind of a key part of this. And I think it's important to understand too that in over the course of a week we may spend multiple hours per day with a person in basic attendance shifts, like through a team counselor, whereas the psychotherapy maybe a couple hours a week. And in that kind of contained environment, you can really go into difficult, painful relationship issues and mind issues that if you did that for multiple hours a week, most people wouldn't benefit from that. In fact, it would be very detrimental probably. So we're very careful to differentiate how deep we go and how to keep people grounded in their environment and all that. So in terms of being attuned to the experience of being with someone during basic attendance of whatever role, but in this case, we're with you, Laura Ann. Windhorse is also a mindfulness-based approach. Mindfulness and health-based, they go right together. And wondering what any of you would have to say, just trying not to put you constantly on the hot seat, Laura Ann, but what any of you would say about the mindfulness-based part of Windhorse and basic attendance. How would you describe that, especially in the context of what you've heard from Laura Ann?
Well, I'm thinking of Laura Ann's experience of spending maybe weeks or months of shifts sitting in a room with someone who maybe isn't relating very directly. I think Laura Ann called it parallel play. And for me, in moments like that, there's a certain, one's mind can want to become distracted or go to sleep or start ignoring the other person or just zone out. And I think part of what we offer that's very precious is we're constantly bringing ourselves back into nowness and into the present moment, so that when a client who's with us, who's maybe not relating much, does spark up and does have an interest or a desire or a passion, that we kind of catch that moment with them, that moment of clarity or that moment of movement, and we're able to not feel a sense of resisting that we can flow with that and help them take that into their lives and into the world.
Yeah, and just adding to that, when it comes time to explain what mindfulness is, I always like to contrast it. It seems easier to think of what being mindless is, because most people, can relate to having times of just being mindless and not being in tune with their environment, what's going on. And relating to Laura Ann's situation with this client, like Jeremy said, catching that, being mindful of when those opportunities arise to, relate to the client in a deeper way, or kind of move towards health, their goals of health, but also being mindful to be sensitive of how much that work that may have been for the client, and not to push too much or get too excited about the opportunity and put your own desires and goals for health too much into the client's world. So that to me is a aspect of mindfulness also.
Which I think segues right into how you were being mindful, Laura Ann, with your own experience in the moment. You were attuned to and aware of, mindful of what you were going through. And then there's the relationship, and then there's your outer world and being present to that, and I think the basic attendance practices that's like the ground of it, is being present and letting in. I think is the ground of all of it.
Kathy, when you say being present, like in the present moment.
Yeah, being
Yeah.
in the moment. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now, in the present moment of nowness, whatever that means to anybody,
Yeah.
where you have an awareness of inner, outer, and, really a felt sense of one's own presence, and then being in the space with whatever arises.
So you're not lost, and I think Connor, you and Jeremy were both talking about this. You're not so lost in the future or lost in the past or lost in your own tumult of your mind, but you keep coming back. So you actually are more present to be with the other person, for instance, and the intelligence that's on the spot.
Absolutely. You know what I'm curious about? Can I throw out a curiosity?
Yeah.
The mutual path piece of this seems really rich. How this came up, and it was the client's curiosity about you, right? That kind of crystallized it more, and that's what gave birth to this mutual exchange. So, Laura Ann, I wonder if you could share what this brought up for you, how this arose, and just how this relates to your life experience.
One of the things that we talk about with basic attendance is we talk about it as a way of increasing connection with others and moving away from isolation. And what I feel so much in this role is it reminds me how much other people and just kind of like the nuggets of wisdom and the points of connection I've had with other people have informed my own sense of self. And so when I'm with clients on a shift, I'm really aware of that, and I'm really aware of kind of what we give to one another, or what we are understanding from one another. And sometimes, there's things that can happen on a shift with a client that can be incredibly triggering for me, like not as connecting in some kind of way. And then I actually have to take some time and sift through it and go, I wonder what's in that for me. And how do I relate to this? And so there's ways in which I feel like I'm evolving in relationship to clients just as much as they might be evolving in relationship to me. And it's, I think there's something about mindfulness in the connection as well, in terms of the mutual path, in terms of not getting too excited and feeling into the kind of threshold or capacity that the relationship can hold and the connection can hold, and what my boundaries are around it too. And how much I want to share at a time, or what they're actually asking me, and when is it, if I'm sharing something, is it for me or is it for them? So these are the kinds of questions and the precision that's required to sort of sift through in order to be in relationship in this way that's not, in an office. There has to be room to kind of allow yourself to keep checking in with how much of yourself you bring. And it feels like it changes from shift to shift and from person to person.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very well said. Really appreciate your response.
Something about I think like this mutual recovery is the willingness to be affected, and I think, I don't know if it's ever a good thing in the art and craft of psychotherapy to just see oneself as the change agent, and the client is the only one being affected. I mean, that seems like kind of low form, honestly. I think that as a therapist, you have to always be risking that you're going to be affected, and that is mutual recovery, is that you're challenging and thinking about yourself, and you're showing up. I mean, how else could you show up and be a genuine person?
It sounded like, Laura Ann, from your story of the client, that something shifted a little bit at the point where you presented your own uncertainties around identity and how homophobia, transphobia fits into your life and your psychology. And to me, that kind of like gave this feeling of kind of leveling the playing field between you and the client, to where gives you both like an equal opportunity to kind of explore and learn and gain trust from each other, and you're both going to be hopefully come out changing in positive ways as a result of finding that those mutual uncertainties and how they take some exploration.
Yeah, I think there's something about letting oneself be impacted and also modeling that we all are impacting each other that feels like is part of it in some kind of way. And I think there's something about basic attendance that's about finding friendship and also developing the capacity for friendship too, for some clients, not all. And so allowing there to be room to be a person who's in their own process. And actually the moments, in my short time at Windhorse, the moments where a client actually asks me a question is kind of an amazing moment sometimes, depending on what's happening for the individual, that there's space to kind of wonder about this person they're spending time with.
There was a phrase you used, and I think I'm repeating a little bit of what Jack and Connor already said, but it just really struck me in your presentation that you were talking about identity, and you said that it continues to be confusing for you also. And there's something in me that was just like, yes, being a human being is confusing. And if we try to pretend that it's not, we're doing a real disservice to the folks that we're working with. And the challenges, all the challenges that they're facing, relational challenges around money, family, work, we're also facing these questions and challenges in our own life all the time. We're constantly learning. So for me, that's a big part of the draw also of this work, is that I'm in a continual state of learning with the clients and with the staff that I'm working with.
That feels so true, how you just said that, Jeremy. It makes me think of what Chuck said at the beginning about how things really are tailored to the individual. And there's this sense of finding, their path towards recovery, or even what recovery might look like for someone, is so dependent on them. And it's not actually about having these preconceived ideas that are hardened of what a person is, what a person should be, what we all should do, as if we're, frozen in time and space. So I think there's something about relating to one another as continually unfolding that feels, it's been really special for me to get to do that with clients and with the rest of the team.
Yeah, we're processes, not problems, right?
Oh, I love that.
So there's a couple things I was just hearing in what you were describing. One being, we're all working on a path of some kind. And at the same time, so many of the people that come to us have more extreme state problems, which have a whole different order of challenges oftentimes that we may be working with ourselves. At the same time, I think where this levels out is that we know what it feels like to be vulnerable, working our life, and coming into this relationship with not projecting the feeling like I'm well, you're sick, and we're going to fix you, but that we're equals. We're equal people. We have dignity, goodness, our own versions of sanity. I learned so much from my clients. I work with some of the most brilliant, interesting people amidst the confusion oftentimes that they'll have going on. And when you meet somebody as an equal, they feel that. Consciously, unconsciously, they feel it, and as opposed to feeling like they're always othered or one down. So I think that's another feature, I think, of the mindfulness aspect of this. Let me come back to something. I want to tie up a question about people, not doing to, but being with at the same time. Oftentimes people come to us in a place where they need to actually learn to put their lives together, that kind of thing, and work with confusion. And there's a path of that. And so it's much more effective to work on that sort of thing if you can create this kind of relationship, that sense of equality, a sense of being safe to be with, and a sense of somebody wanting to be with you because they feel seen, they feel accepted. And so we oftentimes can help somebody move from being in a place where they actually need a lot of help just to live in their own home, and a lot of help kind of sorting out dreams from reality. But that kind of relational ground can help that whole thing move. I'm wondering Laura Ann, and anybody else that wants to comment on this. So this all makes total sense from the standpoint of helping someone attach and connect with a team and connect with life and jump starting back into life. How does this work to help a person move away from the team, to internalize what they've learned with the team, but then to at some point move beyond and out into ordinary life and no longer needing the team?
We're talking a lot about equalness and genuineness, and which is all really true. And there is a reason that we get paid, that we're actually showing up. And there is something about the art of basic attendance that, as each of us, people who've done a lot of basic attendance, we're responsible for helping to hold a certain frame and container. I'm curious about that part, I guess, that that inside, like we are doing something. It's otherwise we'd be all big volunteer, because we're all equal, right? So why would you get paid to do something where everybody's equal? Because it's these things are kind of paradoxical. I think that there's also this we're holding a form and a shape that a lot of your story, Lorianne, was, I think maybe what you left out is how much form you brought to it, like in the, to hold the attention in a certain way that this could all happen inside of, I guess. So I just didn't want to lose track of that part of it.
It makes me think of kind of sensing into the capacity for a certain person at a given time. And oftentimes the role of a team counselor or the team in general is to kind of fill in, at least in the beginning, places where the client might have difficulty doing something for themselves in terms of taking care of their environment or remembering, keeping a rhythm around what they're eating or sleeping, or just, holding kind of a routine that has health in it. It actually makes me think about the role of the housemate in many ways, is kind of holding these regular rhythms. And there's something about that. And over time, I understand it as there becomes more, as the person finds more sense of calm in themselves and a steadiness within the context of having that kind of support, then there's room to start to play with going, okay, well, what happens if you start taking over this task?
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of see what happens. Or oftentimes it seems to me that so many clients are dealing with a real experience of failure in themselves around needing certain kinds of support or feeling like things haven't worked well for them in the past in certain ways. And so there's a lot of undoing of shame around needing kinds of support, and also feeling brave enough to try to take on more responsibility in certain ways. That has to be developed a little bit. And the team makes a space in order to kind of explore that's safer than maybe what the person has experienced in the past in some kind of way.
And I like what you were saying, like the team filling in. It's almost sometimes, I think it was like the client can kind of borrow the resourcefulness of the people. Like your description, your client was borrowing a lot of your resourcefulness, and then to try on new things and then start to own them themselves. Yeah. Sometimes people, I think, because they're trying to avoid becoming dependent, they try to separate from the team too quickly. And it's again paradox of like relaxing into being dependent on the team members, a healthy dependence. Humans, we're primates, we're interdependent. By nature, we're wired to be connected to each other. That, when the collective can relax, then, the collective can relax and all of its members. There's kind of a, sometimes the word is used these days is co-regulating that happens between all of our nervous systems. And then when somebody's really grounded in that and they're able to use the team to experiment with new things and get stronger, then, getting back to your question there, Chuck, is then they start to take it on, like you're saying, Lorianne, they can start to do things on their own, and they try doing it themselves. That gradually they kind of incorporate the resourcefulness that they learned with the team members to a point where they integrate it more and more into themselves, and ideally get to where they don't need the team one day. So.
And I think those are rich moments when we get to that point, where the person has matured or internalized the external support that's been created for them, and taking those steps. It's part of growing up, and this becoming interdependent, and there's sadness with that. It's poignant, and I think that's something to stay with and to experience and to wish each other well, in these transitions. They're poignant times, and I think that's something we in this world of Windhorse, I think this is brought to our attention from families at times, because they might think we're cultivating some kind of dependence here, and there is a healthy dependence that can be experienced, and actually that can help a person individuate from their family system. But now they're attached to us, and then how do you take those next steps, and how can that be a launching pad in a good way? And then it's poignant, and it can be sad, because we do have these professional structures, that we're also embodying. So.
Thank you all for this lively conversation, and particularly Laura Ann, for you describing in such a beautiful way this process that you went through with this client, and your mutuality of it, and it was a beautiful example. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed Windhorse Journal Entry 80, Relationships that Invite Health, an Overview of Basic Attendance, Part 1. Stay tuned for Part 2 of this conversation next month, where the group continues this discussion, offering even more insights on the therapeutic team dynamics and another client perspective from Connor.
Windhorse Journal is a publication of Windhorse Community Services, supporting recovery from mental health challenges at home and in the community since 1981.